Hey everyone, we're back with another episode of How to Get My Job. We sit down with amazing people within the design and product industry and ask them how their careers started, evolved, and what advice they have for those coming after them. Joining us today is Ben Brewer, a senior manager in the product design team at Moonpig. He is also a design mentor at ADP List. Hey Ben, how you doing?
Hey, I'm really well, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really good. A bit of a sore throat, but we move. So your career journey is super interesting. You've worked with some incredible brands, from Sainsbury to Deliveroo, to name a few. So yeah, what would be really great to get to know from you today and to talk about is that journey and any tips and advice you have for our listeners. So let me jump in with the first question, which is how did you get your first job in product design?
My entry into design was, fairly straightforward in some respects, but I guess the big challenge for me is I didn't really know what part of design I wanted to get into. And I don't want to say the number of years we're going back now, but UX and UI weren't really like nowadays, the kind of courses you can study at uni. Back then, I'd never heard of them when I first landed my first design job. But I suppose going back a bit further than that, I always knew I wanted to get into design. So I studied graphic design at uni, before that, photography and cinematography at college. Before that, I did sort of art and physical product design. And I suppose in hindsight, now looking back, probably the physical product design work that I did was where I got the most amount of enjoyment. So I guess I finished my graphic design degree with quite a varied portfolio. And I spoke to a recruitment agency that really helped me land my first job. There weren't many design jobs going at that point. It took quite a while to land something. And actually, my first job wasn't a design gig. It was actually at a startup media company based in London who were building sort of video streaming platforms like Netflix essentially, but for lots of different companies around the world. And they were hiring a role to essentially do some QA to test the apps before they were released. And it was like, oh, I'm not going to do that. That's not design. Ended up taking that job and thought, well, what I could do is move my way into the design team over time. They had a small design team of two. And that's essentially what happened. I worked there as a QA designer for a year. The company grew massively. I ended up managing 8 people in that team. And after about 10, 11 months, an opportunity opened up in the design team to be a UI designer. I applied. I think I'd built good relationships with that team in my time as the QA designer. And I guess through testing the apps all day, every day, you were understanding customer complaints that were coming through about things that weren't working. You were kind of building empathy for the end user. You were understanding how the business worked and playing that pivotal role you do in a product design function, in a modern product design function. And yeah, that really helped me sort of step into that design role.
Amazing. That's really interesting, like how you started off, I guess, creating like physical products and then going into motion photography. Like it just sounds like you've done like so many things under the creative umbrella.
Yeah, I think all of that stuff on its own has contributed to my career, and
Mm,
none of it's been intentional. I think it's probably the underlying story there, that it wasn't an intentional move to go and do that job. I think
yeah.
that was what landed me in probably the career path I've been on, which is in digital product design. It was been an interesting journey for sure, and I still think back to what if I just turned away that opportunity to go and do that interview for
Mm,
that company because it wasn't a design gig. Where would I be today? So I think, yeah, definitely take the opportunities and just open your mind to what else could you learn from that job.
how did you make the switch from being an individual contributor to a manager?
Following a similar vibe, I suppose, I'd never set out to be a manager. I think I knew at some point in my career I did want to. And actually sort of a segue from the previous conversation. Through joining that startup when it was only 20 people and it grew to 150 by the time I left, I'd ended up managing that QA team from just me being the first person to join it to a team of 8 people. And I reflected that, yes, I want to be a manager at some point. I've been doing this a long time now. But am I the manager that I would want? It took me a long time to figure that out. But I think I knew that I'd been in Sainsbury's 4.5 years. I'd been at the agency I spoke at 4.5 years prior to that. And thought if I had a manager come in, I'd want them to have lots of experience of lots of different ways of approaching problems and product development and managing product design teams.
It's interesting to hear like how conscious you were of what if you were managing people, what they would want from you. So again, it goes back to like, I guess, understanding the user, empathy, and all those amazing qualities. I guess on the topic of qualities, it leads quite nicely into our next question, which is, what are the most important qualities a product designer and design manager could have?
So qualities that would make a good product designer or design manager: having empathy for your team, first and foremost. They're your customers. Showing vulnerability to your team so they feel that they can show their vulnerabilities to you. Genuinely caring for your team, like offering your time, spending it getting to understand your team in as much detail as you can. Having humility, not being afraid to say you don't know, finding people that know more about certain topics than you do. And the final one I mentioned was sort of vision. So having a really compelling vision, being able to story tell that effectively, get people excited about the work.
Yeah, no, amazing. The one that I mean, they're all amazing, but the one that I want to unpack a little bit is the humility one. Because when you think of like being a leader or, you know, a manager, you're kind of made to think that you need to like know everything.
I was usually the person on the call, had all the answers, all the insights, all the feedback from customers, but I wasn't anymore. And I felt really weird. I used to reflect at the end of each week of, you know, what have I done? Like, who am I? Like, what do I bring to the party? And it takes a long time, right? Because design management, you don't see the impact. You don't always see the impact of what you do immediately. Like supporting someone's career progression is one of the most important things you can do. Help them identify where they want to get in the future, then open doors and remove barriers that help them get there.
What a great piece of advice. You don't need to have all the answers. And I guess in the topic of advice, that leads quite nicely onto our final question. What's the best career advice you've ever been given?
But one piece of advice I was given right back when I was at that agency, when I'd first moved into my first design role, a guy said to me, minimum input, maximum output. And that stuck with me since. And it is about being lean. It's about what's the minimum thing I can do here to get the most amount of value or impact out of a certain thing. But I think it's just taking the time to really understand what the impact is you're hoping to have. And then you can figure out how much time do I think I should invest in doing this. So like a few things I've started doing and encourage my teams to do is little things like design your week. So on a Monday morning, I have a 30-minute meeting with myself called planning. And my planning isn't planning out the work, it's planning out the outcome from the week. What do I want to achieve this week? And that might be 1 or 2 things. And then I will design my week to allow me to hit that target. And that'll be the one thing in my list, one thing that I'm going to achieve this week.
Of the productivity hack of having that, you know, that Monday morning 30-minute session, planning out the week, setting a goal or objective. And clearly that advice has obviously worked for you and has got you to where you are today. So thank you for sharing that with us. It's been lovely talking to you.
Likewise. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
No, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. And until next time, bye.
Bye.